Welcome to the Morning Glory Project, Stories of Determination. I'm your host, Betsy Graziani Fossbender. Like in nature, we see determined flowers and vines clinging to life and seeking light. So are Morning Glory people. And in this podcast, I'll interview writers, activists, artists, entrepreneurs, survivors and thrivers, and trailblazers of all kinds. These are folks that have been determined to get over, under, around, and through the obstacles that face them, or to seize the opportunities that come before them. I find these people inspiring and amazing. I know you will too. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome to the Morning Glory Project, David Henry Sterry. He is perhaps best described by the list that he provides himself: writer, performer, book doctor, raker of muck, survivor, pitcher, breeder, baker, grower, ex-industrial sex technician, ex-problematic hypersexualist, ex-marriage counselor, Harleyist, humorist, husband, hermit, exhibitionist, reader, watcher, athlete, activist, father, and fool. He is the author of 16 books, including Chicken, Self-Portrait of a Man for Rent, and Hoes, Hookers, Call Girls, and Rent Boys, as well as The Essential Guide to Getting Your Book Published. The juxtaposition of those titles might say a lot about him. 2 of his books are currently being made into films, and David is the co-founder of The Book Doctors, with a long career of helping writers to get successfully published. So, how does a guy go from being a kid who made money for sex to being a sought-after teacher of writing and a successful author? Well, that's the story that David's here to tell. David, thanks so much for joining me on the Morning Glory Project today.
Thank you so much, Betsy, for having me. I feel it's not even morning and I feel glorious.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Well, I'm visiting with you, of course, in the time of social distancing. And so we're visiting remotely, just so everyone's listening. We're not sharing a microphone or anything. And I know that you've told me that you and your loved ones are safe and well. I'm pleased to know that. So today, what I want to talk to you about, of course, this story arc of yours. How does a kid get to be a rent boy, first of all? And then how does a rent boy get to be a book doctor?
That's a very good question. And one that I could give you an answer that's hopefully 3 minutes long, or I could give you an answer that's 100 hours long. So I'm going to give you a 3-minute version.
Okay, good.
You just have to be in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place in the wrong time, depending on your perspective, to become a 17-year-old rent boy. Going to the Beverly Hills Hotel and mansions in the Hollywood Hills to service adults sexually. I was in Hollywood all by myself. I had $27 in my pocket. My parents were nowhere to be seen. I was 17 and I went to college. I found out they didn't have dorms and I was shocked and shows what an idiot I was at the time. And I was just wandering up Hollywood Boulevard and I met this guy in front of Grauman's Chinese. He had a shirt that said sexy on it. He asked me if I wanted a steak dinner. I'm like, yeah, I'm really hungry. That sounds great. Next thing you know, he drugged me. He sexually assaulted me. I escaped with my life. And as the sun was rising the next day, I was in a dumpster trying to eat some fried chicken. And a guy said, hey, do you want a job frying chicken? I'm like, yeah, I do. So I fried chicken for a week. Betsy, I don't know if you ever fried chicken for a living.
I've not, but I've made hot dogs and cotton candy for a living.
Oh, well, then you know a little bit about the horrors involved. The spattering grease is the big problem. So I work for a week. It's horrible work. He gives me my check. I can't even live off this amount of money. And then he says, well, how would you like to make some real money?
The chicken guy says this to you?
Yes, the chicken guy, the manager of the place. And I said, well, I would like very much to make some real money. And he says, well, I got rich friends who'd like to party with a boy like you. And this is how foolish I was. I thought I was going to be paid to go to parties and exchange bon mots with rich people. Well, of course, that was not his intent at all. And I found that I had a real affinity for the work. I was always somebody who I worked with women and I liked girls. I liked women. I was sort of my mom's go-to person to talk to because we kept getting moved every couple of years. And my father was an absent dad mostly. So I was really good at talking to and comforting, women of a certain age. And I did really well in the job. And I got paid so much money. It was just ridiculous.
So in a way, it sounds like, in a way, and I've read pieces and watched you perform certain pieces of your story. In a way, it sounds like it was a party, but it also was a party not without negative consequences for you too.
Well, yeah, it was people, especially guys, like, dude, how do I get hooked up with that, dude? How do I get paid for having sex with girls? Like, no, you don't. You have to. I tell them to read the whole book because
Hmm.
a lot of the people who hired me were very damaged people, and a certain percentage of them were looking to inflict their pain on me.
Mm.
And I had no recourse. I was young, and I was, when you get assaulted, but what happens, your brain changes, and the part of your brain that's responsible for communication atrophies, and the part that's responsible for emotion and rage specifically engorges. So wasn't able to talk. I was raised by English people to begin with. So, and I was taught not to say when something's wrong, stiff upper lip. So it was a terrible combination for me. And
Mm.
there was a couple of clients I had that were just lovely people who I learned from. I mean, I learned about tantric sex, and I once had an 82-year-old client who was, I was her birthday present, and she was just
Mm.
the loveliest human being. And she treated me so beautifully. So there was great things about it, but on the grand scale, the amount of damage that I downloaded was far outweighed the good experiences I had.
I like how you talk about that, what you just said about in terms of prostitution, and that there you often encountered damaged people who wanted to unload their damage onto you. I wonder if that's the common experience among sex workers in general. That that I've just never heard it put quite that way.
Well, I, of course, edited a book full of sex workers, so I know a lot of them, and I've spoken with a lot of them. And yes, if you choose to continue in that line of work, the best industrial sex technicians learn to look for those red flags, and you can spot them when you know what you're doing of someone who's going to inflict themselves on you and
Mm.
punish you. And you learn how to sort of curate your customers very, very carefully, which
Mm.
I couldn't do that. Like I didn't understand how the world worked and how people work. How could I? I was 17.
And David, what do you think? I mean, because you're funny and you're beautifully spoken and all those things, and I love listening to you. And folks should go on to YouTube and find clips of you, and go to your website and find that, because they're delightful, and you have a quality that I love, which I love in certain comedians too. People who can make you laugh and then teach you something poignant in the middle of it. That you have those two qualities. So because you have this lively and vivacious exterior and presentation, I wonder if you'd linger for a moment on what do you think that it cost you, that life?
Well, I mean, first of all, the assault that I went through, I was raped by a very angry person, and that just completely, you know, broke me. I was destroyed. My personality was. I went into that guy's apartment as a carefree 17-year-old with, some problems, of course, but I left there, I just, racked with, there wasn't even a word for PTSD then, but I was full of it. And I just, my brain was disordered. I got a disorder from
Mm.
that. So if that hadn't happened, I might not even have, probably wouldn't even have gotten into this line of work. But
Right.
being in that, being taking money for having sex affected me in, gave me things to carry that were, some of them were good and a lot of them were bad. But one of the worst things was that I compartmentalized so much, which is what you do. Being um, a male sex worker is more difficult in one key way. There are many things in life you can fake, Betsy, but an erection is just it's just not
It's
one
not
of them.
one of
So
them.
you have to be able to perform, and you have to be able to put all these experiences aside so you can make your body work. And I got
Oh,
so good at that I had a lot of trouble having civilian sex for years because I would be thinking, and I had this thing that I did in order to get myself feeling sexual, which was pretend I was in a pornographic film. Well, that's a terrible way to try to make love to somebody that you want to be intimate with.
right. Somebody that you want to be fully present
Yes,
with
present with and
and enjoy and playful and all those
engaged.
things.
Yes, and it was virtually impossible for me to do that for years and years and years. I just had so much trouble shedding the persona of I used to call him, I had a name for this character, the lover stud guy.
Hmm.
The character that I played, and I found that I played it all the time, and it really was a terrible detriment to me sharing real, genuine love with another human being when I wanted to. I found it very hard to do that.
You know, I wonder as you're talking, you're talking about kind of departmentalizing things.
Yeah.
I'm wondering just or observing that I don't think it takes sex work for that to be the case. I know that's true for vets
Oh, yeah.
that have survived trauma. I know that's true of people who've survived abuse of various kinds. And it seems like, it's a necessary thing to do. I mean, to cope, to get through what you need to get through, you have to kind of section off parts of yourself. So it's an adaptive thing that works for the time that you need it to. But after you don't need it to, you don't know how to stop it.
I didn't know how to
Right?
stop it. Yeah, and I really didn't. And I was so, I just didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence at that point in my life. Again, I was raised by English people, and they just were not talkers or feelers. Not that they didn't feel, but they didn't have any facility for
Vocabulary,
talking.
right?
Yeah, vocabulary, or even an idea that this was something that was good to do. Learn how to talk about what's going on inside you.
I think that often when people don't talk, when they have that style, that kind of stoic, as you call it, stiff upper lip style, to me, I think it's because they're so afraid that if they go there, they won't be able to get back out of it.
Yeah.
They just don't want to talk about, they don't want to uncork that bottle.
Oh, absolutely. No, no, no. But it's like the genie's going to come out, and he's going to be an evil genie who's going to destroy everything.
Right.
The idea of looking vulnerable or emotional in that culture, it's just completely verboten. It's not allowed.
So how long of a period of time? And by the way, what era is this?
Oh, 1974.
1974.
Yes.
So what kind of time? How many years did you
Yeah, I
spend?
was 9 months. I did that work. One human gestation period.
So you got reborn out the other side of it, did you?
Yes, I was. I was born out the other side, and I left Hollywood. I went. It was one school year, basically. I arrived there in September. I left in the end of May, and I left Hollywood. I left that business. I left that life. I left those people, and I was lucky enough. Like a lot of the kids that I worked with, they didn't have parents who took them back. I was also lucky in that the first 7, 8, 9 years of my life, my mother just was giving me love all the time and telling me I could be whoever I wanted to be and that I should follow my passion and all those things. That wasn't that common and popular thing to say in 1961 when I was 4 or 5 years old, but she was a very evolved human being. And that's why I think I was able to hold on to a part of myself through
She
this.
planted those
She
seeds
planted
in
the
you.
seeds deep and nurtured them. Yes, she did. Yes.
So why was she unavailable? I know you said your dad left early on, but why was there no parent available to you when you were 17?
My mom, she loved little kids, but once you got to be of an age where you could say you're wrong, she really, really
Didn't
like
have much
that
room
at
for
all.
the.
No, there was no. They shipped me away to boarding school before that. I was acting out. There's this. I was talking to a psychiatrist recently and telling her my story, and she said, "Oh, well, you were the kid in the family who voiced everybody's problems and didn't even know it."
They call that the identified patient.
Yes, that was me.
Right?
I was totally me. And of course, I didn't know I was doing this, but I was the one who acted out. I was the one who said the things that nobody wanted to say, and I was punished for it terribly. I was not, and I did it in a terrible way. Also, I was trouble, big trouble.
So how do you move from, so that 9 months, which probably seems like a much longer time than it was.
Yes, it does.
Tell me how you changed. Tell me how you left that and where you went from there.
Okay, the short story version is that I became addicted. My people all have addictive qualities to their personality, but I became addicted. As I said in my little bio, I was a problematic hypersexualist, which is just a fancy way of saying a sex addict. I mean, there's a lot of controversy about whether it's an actual addiction, but it's self-destructive behavior. And I was never a suicidal person, but I was kind of asking someone else to kill me, as I realized in retrospect. And I got bashed over the head with a metal pipe, and I realized if I didn't do something, I was going to die. So I found, interviewed dozens of therapists. I finally found one I liked, and she gave me these sort of tools for controlling the addiction. And then she said, well, if you really want to, we have to untie the knots inside of you. And over the course of 2 years, I gradually came to understand what was going on in my brain and my emotions and my body. And it was really the start of a long process of me trying to undo the damage that was done inside of me and learn how to give and receive love in a healthy way. It's the simplest.
Learning how to undepart-mentalize.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. How to be present in the moment. And I was at the time, I wrote screenplays. I just had gotten a 3-picture screenplay deal at Disney, and I had another script sold to Paramount, and I showed one of them to my therapist, and she said, "Oh God, David, these are so stupid. Why are you writing these?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? I just got a 3-picture deal with Disney." And she said, "Oh, David, they're so dumb. You're so much smarter than this. Why don't you write your story? You have a great story." So I decided to write my story, and that led me to getting an agent who became my wife, and etc.
Oh, so wait, I'll come back to that in a moment, but I interrupted you rudely
No.
ask you, what was the writing of that like for you? Was that part of your healing and recovery process?
Oh, definitely. Yes, definitely. No question. The first time I tried to write about it, I was so ashamed and so embarrassed that I wrote a piece of fiction that had really literally nothing to do with my story. I just couldn't do it. I was too embarrassed. I was too ashamed. I was too blocked up. And I wrote this. I mean, I put a lot of time and effort into writing this novel. I didn't even know how to write a novel, but I did. And I gave it to everybody I knew. And eventually one of my friends said, my goddaughter's a literary agent. I like this book. Would you mind if I showed it to her? And I said, "Oh, I would love that." And that person turned out to become my agent and then my wife. And when she read the book that I had written, she said, "Oh, but this is a weird novel. Did this happen to you? All this stuff? Did you really kill your father and 5 different guys who married your mother subsequently?" I know. I said, "I did not do any of those things." She said, "Well, what really happened to you?" And I told her the story, and she said, "Well, that's your book." I said, "Well, that's what I'm trying to write." She said, "Well, I'll help you do that."
Oh, wow. And what's your wife's name, for the record?
Ariel Eckstedt is her name. Been a literary agent for over 25 years and is now the mother of my child. So she was like my Sherpa. She was like my guide to being able to do this. And we wrote a proposal. I wrote the proposal. She helped me with it immensely. And we sold it to a woman named Judith Regan, who was at HarperCollins, who was a very famous publisher. It sold in 2 hours for 6 figures. And then I had to write the book. And I wrote the first draft. And afterwards, Ariel said it was so bad, the first draft, that she was sure we were going to have to give all the money back and that I would never be able to write this book. It was so bad. I was just blaming my parents the whole entire book. Nobody wants to read about that. I didn't really want to write about it, but I couldn't help myself. It took me 60 drafts. I wrote 60 drafts of Chicken before it was right.
Wait, I want to linger on that for a second. It took you 6D, SIXTY, 60 drafts. And I'm wondering, I mean, I know the mechanics of that because I've done some of that myself, but I'm wondering about what kept you going from, to version 51 and beyond? What kept you doing that?
Well, from a practical level, I, got paid a lot of money to write the book, and I didn't want to give the money back. That's number A. Number two, I have a kind of personality where I just am like a dog with a bone. I won't let go until I am satisfied that I've done everything I possibly could to make this thing great. That's just who I am and who I have always was and who I continue to be. But also, people kept urging me to go deeper inside of myself. And I wanted to do that. I was so bad at it because I didn't know how to do it. And I learned how to do that by writing this book, going deeper inside of myself to see what were the underlying causes. What made me do this? Why didn't I call my mom and say, oh my God, please help me? Why did I say, oh, sure, I'll go and abuse a judge in diapers for $500? Yes, of course I'll do that. Why wouldn't I? Like to really understand what was going on inside of myself made me understand myself in a whole new, deeper way. That was part of the recovery process. That's what was part of your question. And it absolutely was a huge component in me getting to the next plateau of my evolution.
Well, and David, I think it can't go unnoticed that your sense of whimsy and humor must also have been a part of your recovery
Without
process.
question.
Does that feel true?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I have always, there's allegedly the urban myth, I don't know, but someone supposedly cured themselves from cancer by laughing at Three Stooges movies. And I believe that it is it's a panacea. It's a balm. And I was I started all this as a stand-up comedian when I was 22 years old. I made my living doing that, and it informed the whole rest of my life. And I absolutely, the comedy in this thing, there were a lot more jokes to begin with. I took a lot, I don't want to have any jokes in there. And I kept writing jokes, and people kept saying, that's a joke. This is not a joke book. This is a memoir.
Well, it's the difference between a joke teller or a humorous storyteller. Right?
Exactly right. I was being a joke teller, and I had to learn how to be a storyteller that had a periodic black comedy in the book where it was called for.
From the outside looking in or listening in, it seems like the transition from joke teller to storyteller is about authenticity.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Of telling the real truth underneath the joke. Yes, it is.
And it still has funny in it, but it can have pain in it too.
Yeah, I was just watching a Richard Pryor a movie, and the stuff that he talks about being addicted and like killing his car. And it's so raw and so he's telling the deepest truths in his life. And every 23 seconds, you laugh your ass off. I sort of had these models for what I wanted to do when I told a story. I wanted to be able to tell a story that did make people laugh. And then when you laugh afterwards, you go, oh, wow, did he just say that? Wow, okay, yeah.
Right. It's funny. I often cite Richard Pryor specifically. It's so fun. It makes me smile that you'd name him because he, like you, and like other comedians that I am attracted to, they had this way of making you laugh and then making you almost feel a little bad for having laughed, and then make you feel touched and make you feel a little sad, and then make you laugh again and feel bad for being sad.
I know. It's the gamut. Yes, yes.
And so it seems also that you had this sort of three-legged recovery process. That there was the therapist, there was the writing, and there was your wife.
Yes, that is true. Absolutely true.
Tell me how you go from being rent boy to an agent's partner.
Yeah, well,
she must be quite a special human.
She is a very special human being. See, I was always the person who could I'd go to a party and I had a radar for finding the woman who had the most attractiveness to me in relationship to the least ability to give one drop of love. So those are always the people I was attracted to.
You mean somebody that you were attracted to who could give you nothing?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. Except be pretty. Yes, or maybe some sexuality. So I had to unlearn all of those things. And I had a secret life. I always had a secret life. So, and I always had a girlfriend. I was married before this, and I was always engaged in my secret life that I wouldn't tell any of these partners about. And then I had my above ground life. So I was determined at a certain point. I said, I'm not going to hide who I am anymore. I'm not going to hide a secret life. I'm not going to have a secret life. I got dumped by my fourth fiance in 5 years, and that's really where I hit bottom. And I said, I'm not going to lie anymore. And the next woman I was interested in was Ariel Eckstedt. So we go on a date, and it's 4 a.m. And she's like, well, what is your story anyway? And that's the moment I would have always said in the past, oh, blah, 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 and just told, the story I had made up about myself, about what a nice guy I was. I didn't tell that story. I told the story I told you earlier. I was 17, blah, blah. I went to the college, and then I got raped. And I had always expected people to run away from me if I ever told them that, like I was damaged goods. I was soiled. So I tell her the story, and she sort of like tilts her head a little bit and goes, oh my God, that is fascinating. And then she asked me about 50 questions about my story. And you did what? And then he did what? Well, wait a minute. Now, why did he say that? She got deeper and deeper into it.
That sounds like the perfect combination of both a love interest. She's a love interest and an interested audience member. I mean, that's custom made for you.
Totally perfect. So it was just it was like a life-changing moment. You can tell if you have to pick the right person, but you can be truthful about yourself. I could tell the true story with all of the horrors and the joys, the misery and the ecstasy, the whole thing. I could be a complete human being who I was with somebody who I really, really was attracted to and was great and nice and somebody I should be with. It was a moment where sort of everything comes together, those moments in your life where I was working so hard for so many years to try to do this thing. And then I finally found the right person to do it with, and it came tumbling out. And my life just changed forever that night.
Well, it strikes me that, to me, my own love story in my life, both with my partner and with my dearest, closest friends, those are the people that you can share the real story without the shame.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It sounds like that's what's true for you and Ariel.
Absolutely, yes. It was so. It's hard to find people like that.
It's worth the search, though, no?
It's totally worth the search. Yes, you'd be crazy not to find that if you can. So she and I eventually started this. We wrote the Essential Good Guide to Getting Your Book Published, and we started the Book Doctor business. So that's how you get from there to there.
Okay, it's certainly not it's a zigzaggy path for sure.
It is a very circuitous, mazy route. It is, yes.
Well, so David, right now is Chicken being made into a film? Is that the?
A TV series actually now.
Wow.
Originally, it was going to be a film, and now it's going to be a series. And
it will be. Where will people find it?
It's actually we have a script, we have a showrunner. We are now looking to hook up with exactly the right director. And these things in Hollywood often take very long periods of time.
Well, and right now, of course, in the time of COVID-19, everything's frozen in a terrible, awful way.
Yes, yes. And my other memoir, Master of Ceremonies, about when I was at the MC at Chippendales, is also being made into a TV series. And it looks like we're about to get an offer from a big company. I can't really talk about the specifics of it, but
you'll let me know when it happens so that I can publicize that. David, thank you so very much for your time today, for sharing your story, the authentic story without the shame. I'm pleased to know you and pleased to hear more, and I'll be looking for lots more opportunities to hear what you're up to. You're a delight, and thank you so much for your generosity.
This was a joy. I really had a fun conversation with you, and thank you for having me.
My conversation with David Henry Sterry this morning was so fascinating because on one hand, he's a live wire. I mean, he's just big fun and big laughs and so colorful, but at the same time, there's a poignancy about what he shares. And I was so moved by that. I was also moved by what he talked about in his youth suffering trauma, and how his therapist said to him that they needed to untie the knots. Untie the knots. I think of so much of what we've experienced that might be dark or traumatic or difficult in our histories. And I think that's an interesting way to describe it, the knots that we need to untie. It's not that there's something wrong with us, it's that there's something to unravel in there. That's a pretty good extra bloom for the day. Thanks so much for listening to the Morning Glory Project. I hope that you are safe and cared for and provided for in this difficult and surreal time that we're all living. Blessings to you. Now, go out and bloom.